And as part of our Extreme series, looking at disparities around the world, tonight we travel to Turkey. It's a country where women have made great strides, but as Jonathan Head reports from Istanbul, that progress has not been shared by all.
This is how Yildiz Ay's day begins, with a 2.5-hour journey across the endless suburbs that house most of Istanbul's 15 million inhabitants. She has to take 4 different buses. It is a hard life, yet in many ways Yildiz is lucky. She's managed to escape from a violent marriage, and she has a job. Only a quarter of women in Turkey work. Dilek Bil has a very different journey to work, from her home on the shores of the Bosphorus. The former banker now runs her own marketing and advertising agency. Her success, though, is not exceptional. Turkey has more women in top management positions than most European countries.
Being in advertising, it's very European, very modern. The age group is very young, so it's very dynamic, it's very good, but you don't feel the gender issue there.
Do you feel lucky?
Yes.
The statistics for women in this country are shockingly bad. And yet, you'd hardly know that from a casual glance here in central Istanbul. And that's because the contrast between the two Turkeys is so extreme. There are women whose lives are as free and full of opportunity as anywhere in Europe, and yet others who are trapped in virtual domestic captivity. Yildiz makes her living cleaning houses because she only had 4 years of primary schooling. When she tried to leave her abusive husband, her family took his side.
It was very hard. When you mention divorce, your family won't accept it. I told my dad and brother about my husband's violence, but my brother said, he's a member of the family. You have to take care of him.
Dilek Bil is using her entrepreneurial experience to help Kagidar, an NGO pushing to get more Turkish women into the workplace. But she believes change is bound to be slow unless more women enter politics as well.
There's a mustache economy in this country, so a lot of men involved in the workforce, in the policy making. If women are not on the policy making side, the decisions are made by men. So the issue is not very well focused. The priority is not women. Therefore, we have to have more women in the policy making side too.
At the top end, the success of Turkish women like Dilek is impressive. But down at Yildiz's level, the lack of choices for women are still glaringly obvious. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Istanbul.
Well, among those leading the charge for women's rights and education around the world is the organisation Women for Women International. This year they are particularly focusing on the plight of females in Afghanistan. And the group's founder and CEO, Zainab Salbi, joins me now from New York. Thanks for coming on the programme. You saw that piece there from Turkey where there are some very glaring discrepancies in a country that prides itself on being very secular and very modern. Which part of the world surprises you still most when it comes to that discrepancy, that gulf between expectation and reality when it comes to women's rights?
Good question, actually. Thank you so much. You know, discrimination and marginalization against women is a global issue, in my experience. It is more extremes in countries like Afghanistan or Congo or in different part of the developing world, if you may, and it's less extreme in the United States or in Western Europe. But at the core of it, it's really still not equal. Women in here, for example, in America, are only 3% of decision makers in the media are women. Only 2.2% of peace signatories to peace agreements are women. 18% of political representation are women worldwide, and 1 out of 4 women in the world are still violated and abused. So it's still a global issue. There are more very extreme countries, again, like Afghanistan, and there are very less extreme countries like America. And really, the issue this year, particularly as we celebrate the 100th year anniversary of International Women's Day, is how do we make it a turning point? And how do we make this century a women's century where once and for all we get equality and justice for women in all areas?
I mean, it surprises me that you say this about America, although I see the statistics, all the time, every day. And it surprises me because we've had so many pieces on in the last 2 years how women have really benefited more than men in this financial crisis. They are doing many of the jobs that men used to do. And then, of course, you've got the high-profile examples of Hillary Clinton and Condoleezza Rice. Why in this country is there still this difference?
Another very good question. I think, honestly, there are many reasons. I mean, you're right. We have accomplished a lot of things in the last 100 years. It was 100 years ago that women in America, as well as in Europe, that called for International Women's Day. And it's interesting that they called 100 years ago for the following. They called for equal rights to vote, for work opportunities, and it was a peace movement as well. 100 years later, we have accomplished a lot. American women particularly have accomplished a lot. European women around the world have accomplished a lot. But as I'm standing in front of you here, we still don't get paid equally. And we still are not represented at the negotiating tables in Afghanistan. And even representation here in America is frankly good. It's very good, but it's not equal. It's still a symbolic one. And so it's a historical movement that we need to look at, and not to be content with what we've accomplished, and what we've accomplished is a lot, but to really aspire for much more. And that's the appeal for Women International.
And let me ask you one other one, Zainab. I mean, we've seen in the protests in Egypt and Tunisia, less so in Libya, but certainly Egypt and Tunisia, very articulate, forceful women, I mean, both in English and in Arabic, standing up in front of cameras demanding their rights. Will that be inspiring to women in parts of the world where they really have very few rights, like, for instance, Afghanistan? Quickly.
Well, in Afghanistan yesterday, actually, more than 100 of women also demonstrated in Kabul, asking that they are part of the negotiations and reconciliation with the Taliban. Of course, it is inspiring. We're living in a world where women are sharing each other's experiences through social media and other ways. The question is, women have always been part of public demonstrations, actually, historically, especially in the Middle East. The question, they've always been sent back home. And today, what happened to Egyptian women, where they were actually attacked during the demonstration, is a very dangerous point that what is the future of history is determined by the future of women.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Zainab Salbi, thank you very much for joining us.